So since we've just heard Ellen Sachs's story, let's start our roundup of categories by looking at the psychotic or schizophrenic disorders. Psychotic disorders are among the most debilitating of the mental disorders, and of course the most obvious and severe. They're characterized by severely distorted perception and the experience of reality that differs from the rest of us. People suffering from psychotic disorders often have very disorganized thoughts and speech, inappropriate emotional reactions, and lots of other behavioral oddities. And other inappropriate behaviors like talking to oneself or wearing a winter coat in warm weather, all sorts of peculiar behaviors that are not explainable by our ordinary logic or modes of behavior in society. As you watch these next couple of videos, pay attention to these two aspects of psychotic disorders. Schizophrenia in particular, and other psychotic disorders as well, tend to have two types of symptoms: positive symptoms and negative symptoms. The positive symptoms are positive. They're the addition of stuff. They're hallucinations, delusions, peculiar behaviors, beliefs, acting out, yelling, that kind of thing. While negative behaviors are the absence of things. No affect in the voice, loss of speech, loss of movement, catatonia, which is rigid muscle tone, and the inability to control the body well. Of all the mental disorders, psychotic disorders come closest to a medical model of illness. We know that there are strong genetic components to schizophrenia. There are major brain abnormalities in the circuits, thinning of the cortex, and we know that there are multiple aspects of the disease that might be treated by different drugs or that might be inherited independently within families. We call these individual aspects of a complex disorder endophenotypes. These come from a biological term, phenotype, which is the expression of the genotype or the actual body, the result of the product of genes. Complex phenotypes, like schizophrenia, can be broken down into multiple endotypes, which are more simple components of the complex disorder. What's new and interesting in psychiatry is that we're finding that many of these endophenotypes are also found in non-symptomatic relatives. So people who have a brother or sister who may be schizophrenic but are not themselves diagnosable, under careful laboratory testing, it often seems that they suffer deficits relative to people who don't have schizophrenic relatives in subtle things like the ability to have mental flexibility or abstract ideas, sometimes spatial processing or emotional communication may be different in these otherwise normal people who share some genetic components with their schizophrenic relatives. This same endophenotype approach is being successfully used now to look at the genetics of autism. For instance, many children who have an autistic sibling often show very subtle deficits in facial recognition or emotional understanding that are apparently normal. No one would notice that they have any deficit except in a careful laboratory test. It shows that the siblings of autistic children have very subtle differences from children who don't have an autistic sibling. And that reflects the very complicated origins of these disorders that require probably multiple genetic factors and multiple environmental and experiential events that lead to the full-blown expression of the disorder. So please continue now and watch these videos on mood disorders, including depression and bipolar disorder, and I'll be back with another podcast to sum those up and talk in detail about some of the other categories of mental disorders.